Well, welcome everyone to an hour with the experts on dental sleep medicine. I'm Brent Garvin, Senior Product Manager for Imaging for Planmeca USA, and I'm so thankful that you carved out time in your day to spend it with us on this important topic to hopefully dentists across the country and as well as throughout the globe. So a couple housekeeping things before we get started with today's webinar CE course. As far as questions and answers, we have a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen that you can type in questions. We will get to those at the end of the session. We will also have a chat section there. That's going to be designated towards any sort of technical issues that you may have throughout the webinar, so you can use chat for that function. And Jody with Planmeca is on the line to support us and help us through anything there. But Q&A is where we'd like the questions to be centered towards. And then as far as CEs, they will be posted at the end of the course. So stay tuned for that. We'll do that just as we get to the Q&A portion of the webinar. And then the last thing is, as far as CEs, this is an educational seminar. And we have to disclose that I am an employee of Planmeca, the largest family-owned dental company in the industry. And Dr. Manning, as well as Michael Cohen, are being compensated for their time as they educate us today on the area of dental sleep medicine. So I just want to welcome everybody once again as we get started here, that we do have two really important special guests that I'm going to bring on the screen here in a moment, but just a little bit about the two guest speakers on the panel today. Michael Cohen is the owner and founder of Awaken2Sleep and the co-founder of SleepHeroNetwork.com. And then Dr. Greg Manning is a practicing dentist in Arizona, and he studied at Weber State University in Utah and did his doctorate at the Ohio State. And he is a member of the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine and a diplomat of the American Sleep and Breathing Academy. So we're really excited to have them here and their expert opinions. So we're going to cover several things today. This is a part one of a four-part series, so please stay tuned. Today, we're going to kind of just give an overview, kind of go over some common things, introduction to OSA, obstructive sleep apnea. We're going to go over dental sleep medicine and how that works together, the screening process, and the business aspect behind dental sleep medicine. But before we get into the webinar, I just want to give to your attention, if you go to planmeca.com, there are plenty of webinars. We have a fantastic one starting in a few hours at 1 o'clock Central Time. Becky Cole, hygienist, is going to talk about COVID-19 and the new safety protocols as they relate to the dental office as your team members get back to work. On Tuesday, May 12th, one of my personal favorite persons and friends, Dr. Toni Manito. If you haven't had a chance to hear from him, he's from the Medical University of South Carolina, director of the digital program there, and he's going to help you with inlays and onlays and helping you with restorations, designs, and possible chairside fabrication of those things. So a fantastic course taught by the best of the best, Dr. Toni Manito. And then Wednesday, we have a huge surprise. It's being posted right now, Wednesday, May 13, 3 p.m. Central Time. We are going to have an hour with the experts, and we have three fantastic guests that are going to talk about the ADA's COVID recommendations for imaging. So you'll have the president of the AOMR, the Oral Maxillofacial Radiology Association, a general practitioner, how he utilizes extraoral imaging in their practice, as well as a hygienist from Wisconsin. So we're excited to have you join us on May 13th for that. Please stay tuned. It's being posted as we speak on planmeca.com's website. And then the last thing is rounding out our series on sleep, our pathway to airway. We are going to have on Fridays at 10 a.m. Central every Friday, starting with May 15th. We will have an introduction to OSA and sleep medicine, followed by the 22nd. We will get into the screening process for OSA in your practice. And then we'll finish the series on Friday, May 29th with the business side of dental sleep medicine. So stay tuned for those courses. They're going to be fantastic. They'll be well attended. This is a really hot topic. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's get rolling on why we're here today. So let's go ahead and close this off and minimize and stop sharing and all that wonderful stuff so we can see each other's faces. So hopefully we have on the screen now Michael Cohen and Dr. Manning. And if you want to join us, welcome, welcome, welcome. So we are here, as I mentioned, with Michael Cohen and Dr. Manning. And just a little bit of background of my involvement in sleep. I've been on the imaging side for quite a long time. And I would say since 2015, I've had a little focus on the world of sleep, talked to a lot of doctors, spent a lot of time with this topic, and it seems to be really, really an interesting and exciting topic, of course, in dentistry. And I gotta say, recently I was at a dental show, and that's when I first met Michael Cohen. And we immediately hit it off. And I've got to say, I've talked to dentists. I've been in situations where I'm talking to dentists about sleep medicine. We're talking about how they can implement it. And many of them have a lot of the same things and concerns and all of that. You know, maybe they're trying to get into it. They're enthusiastic about it. They want to know more about how they can get involved. Maybe they're frustrated, right? Maybe they've done this before. They've been down this path. And their stumbling blocks, you know, maybe it's, you know, how they implement it and execute it there in their practice. So as I was having these conversations at this last trade show I was in attendance at, Michael was there, and he spoke to several of my customers and clients and potential customers. And I got to say, I mean, as far as that conversation that you had, Michael, that I saw, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, I think the doctors, the staff all appreciated everything that you brought to the table, your experience and your knowledge. And if you don't mind, who is Michael Cohen? Why don't you give us a little bit about who you are? Say hello. I see there's kids over your shoulder. I know there's Dr. Manning that's waiting in the wings. You know him way better than I do. And I'm going to let you introduce him. But if you don't mind, just share with everyone who Michael Cohen is.
Yeah, well, so that's not the way you were going to introduce me, by the way. But hey, we'll just hop in. So who is Michael Cohen? It depends on who you ask. I would say that first. So thank you for asking me instead of Dr. Manning, because you might have gotten a very different answer with him. Right. No, I would say in a nutshell, I mean, if you ask me what my heart is for dental sleep medicine, why does this actually matter to me? I've been in sleep medicine for over 17 years, on the dental side for about half of that. And my daughter, Anna, so you can see the 4 kiddos in the background. She's the second from the top. She's turning 12 on Saturday. But 11 and a half years ago, we almost lost her to apnea. I mean, literally on a weekend afternoon, picking her up out of her crib while she's turning blue, having an apneic event, and then knowing what I knew clinically about sleep apnea, but seeing how that affected her and then changed our life. I mean, literally, there's moments in life where your entire being or the presence of your family pivots and changes directions. That was one for us. So, you know, for the brevity of this call, if I could shorten down my why to that one story, it's the fact that this knowledge saved my daughter's life. And if we can together help spread that news that other people have hope so that they don't lose their husband, their father, their sibling, the person that matters to them, like my Anna matters to me, that's probably the singular largest focus of who I am and what I'm about in the industry. So Dr. Manning, I will hop in and introduce him. He is a dear friend of mine. He's out of Gilbert, Arizona. I will sing his accolades because he won't sing them himself. But he is a fantastic dental sleep medicine expert. He's been doing this quite a while. I won't steal his thunder, but he and I co-lecture together often. We have a blast together because we believe that education should be fun and engaging, not humiliating. So it's sometimes humiliating for us, but hey, that's okay. We're here for other people. So without further ado, Dr. Manning, give us your highlight reel and see if you can keep it as brief as I did.
Yeah, well, thanks, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to chat. You know, there's one thing in our practice that if there's anything I'm just uber passionate about, it's DO composites. Man, I just cannot get enough DO composites in my practice. And I obviously I'm kidding. You know, we get, you know, bogged down in the mundane of that kind of stuff, where sleep has been such a bright spot in my practice. You know, as we get into this a little bit more, sleep kind of fell into my lap, or came in through the back door. It didn't start off as a passion for me, but it has developed into something that I love doing in our practice. Unfortunately, when we got started with this 10 years ago, there were not the helps out there like there are today. You know, there were not the Brents and the Michael Cohens and the Awaken2Sleeps that had this kind of drive to help other dentists implement this in their practice. You know, there weren't, I mean, there just weren't the resources out there at that time, but there were people doing it. And I thought, if they can do it, I could probably do it. The other thing is that I had just begun a startup in 2009. And if we remember 2009, milk and honey, everything was wonderful. If we remember, just a great time to hang a shingle and try to do a startup. Tells you the intelligence level we're dealing with here. But one of the things that we had going for us, if there was anything going for us, was time. We had some time. And a friend of mine came to Phoenix on a lecture offered by the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine. And he asked if I wanted to go. I went for the social aspect. He went because his boss wanted him to learn about sleep. I made my name on a list because I attended that. I joined the academy because it was $300 and they gave me half off if I attended the class. And so anyway, long story short, I found myself on this list of people that had been trained by the Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine, and I did nothing with it for a year until somebody found me. And he happened to be from Michigan, you know, which is always tough for me. You know, we still treated him with kindness and respect, but he had a transportation business and he was back and forth between Michigan all the time. And he had forgotten his sleep appliance all too often going back and forth. And so he found me on this list because he lives when he's in Arizona, lives very close to my practice. I told him I didn't know what I was doing. I was very honest with him. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. And he said, oh, it should be pretty easy. I'll walk you through it. And this man kind of walked me through, and I basically charged him lab fee for it because I didn't know that I could charge him more because I didn't feel comfortable and confident. But as a result, we made one. He had one in both locations. And then this was early 2000 or late 2010. He started to send a lot of his transportation people, his long haul truckers, to us that were trying to avoid losing their CDL because of sleep apnea and the risk that poses to falling asleep behind the wheel. Long story short, it kind of came in through that way to where we developed some comfort and some confidence with it because they were sort of forced on us. The reason why it was forced on me is because as I had questions along the way, there were not a lot of great resources 10 years ago for me to go. And back then, everybody was sort of hacking through, I call it hacking through the jungle of trying to figure out dental sleep medicine and how it works and how I'm staying legal and how I'm getting paid and just understanding how this happens. And 10 years ago, those resources weren't out there, and everybody that was doing it had sort of hacked their own way through the jungle. So when you would call somebody and say, well, what about this? They would give you ambiguous answers. They would give you answers that they didn't want to give away the secret sauce because they had spent so much time trying to develop this secret sauce on their own that they just felt like they were giving it away, and they just wouldn't do it. And I was paying a lot of time and money to go to courses to learn how to do dental sleep medicine, and having to take little snippets that I would get here and there and incorporate them in my practice because nobody was there 10 years ago to just say, look, if you want to implement sleep in your practice, here's how you do it. Here's a stepwise way to do it. And I'm going to give you all of the secret sauce. And it wasn't until I met about 3 years ago, I met Michael Cohen with Awaken2Sleep, and I looked at their platform and I looked at what they were doing and I said, well, damn, I wasted a lot of time doing this on my own. If they would have been around 10 years ago, this could have been a heck of a lot easier. And then in more recent times, you know, developing advanced imaging in the practice where you're using softwares like Romexis and having this as a resource for the patients. it just increases credibility. It increases the ability to chat with your patients about these kind of things, because while we're really good talking about DO composites, we're not always great talking about life-threatening medical conditions as dentists. So I didn't win, Michael. I took a little more time there than you did, but that is kind of how we started in this, and then it's sort of gotten snowballed from there. Word of mouth, we've even done some marketing. We have physicians that will refer to us now. So
Nice.
So that's it. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So obviously one of the most important questions that I think everybody has is that logo on your upper right shoulder here there, unless you're mirrored the wrong way. So you keep saying Michigan. You mean the state, or do you mean this?
You better be careful, I'm telling you. Listen, Jody was also on the call. She's from Iowa. I'm great having the Big Ten represented. I will cheer for the Big Ten almost all the time until I'm playing them. So,
amen, amen, amen. So I like I said earlier, you know, the whole education thing. It sounds like that's a big part of this whole thing, and helping you know, offices get through that. You know, I've spent a lot of time with dentists trying to get through this process and had those sort of conversations. And I mean, what are some big things, like you've been, you know, doing this for quite a long time, and this question's for either one of you. What are some big things that you've run into out there that are, I mean, it sounds like education's a big factor in all of this. Is there other things that you see as a common thread of implementing sleep in a practice that can be a hurdle?
Michael, if you don't mind, let me take this first, because I want to take something to pass to you, and that is the biggest obstacle of all is the unknown. Obviously, the question marks, and you'll get some information, and you think, okay, I can run with this information, and you run for a little while with it, right up until the next question mark shows up, and then it's, where do I go to get this question mark taken down, or where do I go to get this barrier taken down? So really, I mean, obviously, there's a learning curve, there's some education that needs to happen, there's kind of a new mindset that needs to happen. But as you're sort of shifting mindset and going through the learning curve, how great would it have been for me 10 years ago to have somebody that I could just email or pick up the phone and say, okay, this is my next question mark that's come up. This is my next roadblock. This is my next obstacle. This is the next thing that I don't know how to do. And again, I had what I would consider a mentor, kind of helped me with a few little things. But even that mentor, he was an orthodontist and he was a very great guy, his practice was somewhat close to mine. So he would still kind of be very careful about how he would talk to me about implementation on a large scale or marketing on a large scale. And that is a difficult thing. So to have somebody, again, and I'm not trying to blow too much smoke at him, because he already knows that I think he's a pretty good guy, but to have somebody like maybe an Awaken2Sleep, or to have a representative that works for a company like Planmeca that we know has a passion about this kind of thing, somebody that we feel like has a reach into the community that you can ask those questions to and bring those things back. That's why I think, you know, when you see somebody taking time on a Friday morning like Brent that's saying, hey, I got a passion for this kind of thing, and I want to help other people, to know that I could reach out to his people and have that answer, or know that Michael has that passion because of his why, that I can reach out to ask that question too. So that's, I'll pass it to Michael, because he sees those things. What are the people calling you about? What are the question marks that often come up?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to answer that a little bit under the underneath part, right? When people ask questions, often, like when I ask questions, half the time I don't even know what I'm trying to get at until I'm halfway down the pipe of the conversation, right? So when Dr. Manning graciously calls me a friend and mentor of his of sorts, I would say this: find people that you align with. That's the first thing. You've got to know what your goals are in your practice, in your program. If you don't know what the goals are, then go start gaining information about the field and about how to treat it and what that looks like. Know what your goal is, and then find people that align with who you are and what your vision is, and they've already gone there, or they've taught people how to go there. One of those two things, and probably a balance of both, is ideal, because then you're going to get help from third parties who see your blind spots, who can walk you through that intimidation factor. When Dr. Manning says the question marks, I would say the number one issue with dental sleep medicine, not programs and what kills them, but initiating it and starting it, it's just intimidation. It's the fact that everybody really knows in dental right now. I think it's safe to say that everybody knows about the topic of dental sleep medicine. Most every dentist knows that they can play some role in treating sleep apnea, but they don't know how. And there's a lot of different information. I won't say misinformation, but there's a lot of opinions and conjecture. And there's a lot of experts. And a lot of the experts teach their way to do it, one way to do it. Because like Dr. Manning said, when you cut through the forest for 10 years, you're pretty confident that your way works, and that's not wrong. But it may not be the right way for this person who's asking the questions, because their goals and their vision might be totally different. So I think that's the first thing. Start with your goal, get your vision down, find people that align with you, and then start blazing the path. But don't let that intimidation hold you back from actually affecting change in people's lives. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, what you just described there is interesting, because I think of the word noise, right? And it's really noisy out there. And on the imaging side, you know, we look at noise, you know, from a scanning standpoint, right? A 3D image and all of that, and what noise means. There's a lot of noise out there, I'm hearing. Education's important. Then it's about implementation, getting the team members on board and educating them. Then what I see from my experience is now they all want to know reimbursement stuff. Everybody's looking for this total solution where they turnkey it. They walk in the door. They've got a machine that takes an image. They've got a voice activated thing over here that does this thing for them. They go through this whole process, and it's all turnkey all the way to billing. And I'm just getting right to the point right now. Let's talk about billing. I mean, what's your thoughts on that regarding handling that? Because every state's different. I'm in Michigan, and it's tough.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, let me do the same thing I did last time. I'll give kind of how we go, and then Michael and I have taught enough that I'm going to set him up for I know what he's already going to say. So, look, when we first started, I gave away appliances at lab cost because of this intimidation factor. Obviously, that's not sustainable. We started off with these. The reason why I can say this with confidence is because this is the way we did it. We started off with these long haul truckers that wanted nothing to do with anything on the books. Call me a super young shyster dentist. I didn't know any better. I just said, yeah, you want to come in and pay me cash, and you don't want me to bill your insurance because you don't want your insurance to know that you've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, but you don't want to fall asleep while you're long haul trucking, you know, great. And I developed confidence completely outside of sort of a medical insurance model. I developed into a sleep dentist long before I developed into a medical biller. And the one nice thing about that is that you can kind of start to understand the value of being a sleep dentist. And I'm talking about value in the patient's lives long before you start seeing the value monetarily. And then once you start seeing the value in people's lives, all of a sudden the monetary value is just, it almost doesn't click with me. In fact, Michael and I were teaching a course the last 2 days, a 2-day course, kind of crash course on dental sleep medicine, a webinar. And of course, like Brent said, this is sort of we're saying the stuff that we're saying the quiet stuff out loud now. You know, we're going to say the quiet stuff out loud. And that is, people are weary about saying, hey, are you really asking people for $3,500 for basically 2 night guards that are hooked together? And I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm asking $3,500 for everything that I've learned and knowing how much I can help somebody. And the thing about it is that I told this to somebody yesterday, and I will say it again today. When you have patients like I have that have had appliances now for 8-9 years, and they're ready for a new one, and it's been 3 and 4 years, and they come back and you tell them it's going to be $2,800 or $3,200 or whatever that's going to be, for them, they can't get their credit card out fast enough because their life is now different. Now, I get it. Initially, it's going to be a little bit of a jump for those patients, but once they see the difference this makes in their life, the money becomes less of an issue. You know what I mean? So I say that passing it off to Michael because I do a lot of medical billing now for not only my cone beam scans, but my appliances. We do some for surgical stuff. We've developed that over time. But if I was trying to develop a medical billing practice while at the same time developing the skills and confidence of a sleep dentist, those two just take up so much time independently that try to do those together derails so many people trying to do sleep in their practice because they think that it has to be married to medical billing.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be brief on this and hit a few key points that I think are really important for the audience to hear. So to translate what Dr. Manning just talked about, he started off fee-for-service. He then moved into medical billing. And when he was doing the fee-for-service, he had no confidence because he didn't have his plan, his team, his mentor, his coach, that kind of thing. So he just started hacking away and was basically giving appliances away. Had he not found his new friend, the long-haul trucker, he might have never gotten into dental sleep medicine because it was intimidating. So even a guy like this, who's been doing this for 10 years now, 11 years now, who's wildly successful at it, still had the same challenges that you guys are having or facing, the questions that you're having now. You just have more resources available. So I would say first, he started fee-for-service to medical billing, and that's where he sits today. I'm going to say flat out, medical billing is the #1 killer of dental sleep medicine programs in this country. It is not because it doesn't work, and it's not because it's wrong. It's typically because the doctors, like Dr. Manning just said, they take on too much at one time. Dental sleep medicine is a clinical treatment plan in the dental practice to do life-saving treatment for a patient. Medical billing is one avenue of getting reimbursed. But if you can overcome those initial intimidation factors and question marks to have confidence in the treatment and see clinical success stories, I'm telling you guys, we're on a national webinar, by the way. We are not endorsing or saying you should bill $3,500. That was a round number that he just talked about. Sure. But let's just say that the average cash fee that we see as a national consulting company on this topic is about equivalent to a single unit implant from the implant all the way through the restoration. So whatever that is in your neck of the woods, that's a rough gauge of what you should be looking to do. But just like implants, I would say this too, just like on implants, you would not go to courses and buy softwares and solutions to figure out how to build your implant surgery until you learned how to sync a successful implant and have a great clinical outcome. So let's put things in the right order. Let's get great quality care dialed in, get the team trained, get on track, and then figure out what your goal is. Because like Dr. Manning, he's been successful at this over 11 years. He's in network with Medicare because his practice happens to be across the street from the largest snowbird community in Gilbert, Arizona. He's a smart guy. But if he decided that he didn't want to do medical billing because he wasn't in that neighborhood, that wouldn't be wrong. So you figure out the way that you want to do it, make sure it aligns with your goals, but start small. Don't let medical billing be a deterrent because you don't know how to bill it. You know how to process payment for people, and you know how to communicate value and treatment. Let's start there.
You know, Michael, it's funny because I have this conversation on a daily basis regarding implants, right? Endo's typically covered by insurance. I've yet to find reimbursement for endo, or I'm sorry, for implants. And every single day, dentists are getting up trying to find ways to do more implants, which is exciting. It breathes new, fresh perspective into their practice. It makes the old seem new. It gets them excited again. And so insurance has never been a stumbling block for things like implants. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's fantastic. So insurance.
Hey, Brent, one other, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt you. One other comment on that. I think where you're going with this, I just want to build the bridge a little bit quicker for time because I think we're on the same page. One of the biggest differences with dental sleep medicine, treating sleep apnea from implants, is that most patients understand that dentists can do implants, but in their mind, it's dental. They know they have a copay, they know they're going to be quoted a fee, but the second that they make the mental shift to now this is medical, they assume they have I've got it all covered card that they hand you. And so it's a patient dynamic. It really, truly is. So when you have the confidence in the treatment plan and you can communicate value, there's still ways to help patients get reimbursed on these fees, even if you're doing fee-for-service model in your office. But I think overcoming that hindrance of the patient perspective is also a challenge, and it's one we've got to recognize, because you'll have to overcome that if you're going to do this type of a model.
So professionally, speaking of medical, when do either of you involve a physician for testing and diagnostics as far as that process? What does that look like?
I guess
Dr. Manning.
The answer is 100% of the time. Unfortunately, we can't, as dentists, when I teach, I say we can do the S word, we can't do the D word. So we can screen our patients, we can screen people, and we can start making assumptions. And what I mean by that is we can look intraorally at some of the same things we're looking at for dental: heavy wear patterns from bruxism, high vaulted palate, macroglossia in this huge tongue. We look at it as a dental problem and what the dental implications are. But so often there's those medical implications to that may suggest that they have sleep apnea. So we screen all of these things. We take a health history, and we see patients with hypertension and diabetes, and we see patients with congestive heart failure. And these things are married to sleep apnea, yet we look at them as, well, I wonder how much epi I can give them. You know what I mean? And we don't look at it as like, hey, I wonder if they're dying because they're choking on their own tongue. You know what I mean? And so now we're in sort of that same area. The problem that we have is there has to be a bridge between us screening, because we can do the S word, but to get them diagnosed. Because for all of the wonderful things that we do in the office, including cone beam with the software where we can view the airway and we can show them constrictions, again, all of that is part of a screening process to tell somebody, hey, I think that we may have a problem. The way I describe it is you start to look intraorally, you look at your imaging, and you say, this is starting to quack like a apnea duck. This is starting to walk like an apnea duck. But the only way we can really tell if it's an apnea duck is to get them tested and have that test read by a physician. And once that is read by a physician, then the D word happens. They'll diagnose. And at that point, we become the hired gun. We are a DME provider, a durable medical equipment provider, doing what this physician has told us to do. Now, when I first started, that was an awful, awful roadblock for me, because while I like to engage with people, I don't like to bug people, and having to go to physicians' offices and ask them, hey, would you mind reading my sleep studies? Hey, would you mind sending me patients? Hey, can we do this back and forth? I became, in essence, that person that was bugging the doctor while he was trying to work, and I didn't like that. Luckily, now, for somebody that wants to get into it, a group like Awaken2Sleep has those relationships already. So now I don't have to talk to these doctors. I can send home sleep tests to have the D word done at their house, and then send that test result to Awaken2Sleep, and they'll have a physician, an MD, a licensed sleep physician that's certified to read these tests and formulate the D word, the diagnosis, and then they send that back to me. They have somebody that's licensed in my state. They have somebody licensed in all 50 states that can be worked with. But absolutely, as dentists, we need to know our role, and our role, unfortunately, is not diagnostics. It's screening, but we have to have medicine give us the diagnostics.
Yeah, so I'm going to hop right in here. From the diagnostic standpoint, there are many services at the CE event here. Thank you for talking about us, Greg, but there are lots of services out there that have physicians licensed in your state that can do interpretations. The process for that is incredibly simple. You need to take a home sleep test unit that you own or lease, you use it on the patient, you plug it in via USB into your computer. That data gets transmitted in a HIPAA compliant way to the company that preps it and works with that physician. So your options as a dentist currently are wide. You can use a service like that. You can refer to an in-lab sleep test. You can refer to a local sleep physician. The problem typically with those local relationships is that they're hard to build. So if you're trying to start a program, you're waning in your confidence, you have a lot of question marks, try not to add complexity. Try to have simple solutions that you can use in your practice that are at your disposal, but make sure that you're following legal guidelines. Like what Dr. Manning said, you can do the S word and screen, but you can't do the D word and diagnose. Let the physician put their license on the line, which is exactly what it's for in their scope. They have to diagnose apnea, give you recommendations for treatment, and then at that point, your scope of practice, your liability is limited to what you are doing to affect change in that patient's life, in their mouth with their dentition and with their apnea. So you have your treatment protocol and you're good to go. If you are reading a sleep test, just to be clear, and that is not interpreted by a sleep physician, you're operating outside of your scope. So please don't do that. Make sure you have the resources that you need, whether it's local or a separate company, to get that in. It's not expensive. And the fact that it's doing it the right way and checking the legal boxes is super important. One other note on home sleep testing, because I know that's a big topic in dental, because home sleep tests mirror your scope of practice and what they can test for. There are a couple of states, specifically New Jersey and Georgia, where your scope of practice as a dental provider is limited by your board. In those states, it is almost impossible to own a home sleep test. So in general, my recommendation is check with your state board. If they have any specific regulations about this, absolutely follow those. The ADA published their statement in October 2017, and most boards have not gone against that. Essentially, it's kind of the standing rule since then. But do your due diligence. You know what state you're in, check your state guidelines, and then go from there with your program. Brent, back to you.
So these test results and all of that they gather from the patient, is that something they can read, they should read? Does that need to get to the physician? Help us understand that a little bit more.
Got it. So we call them the bookends, if you will. So in the very beginning of the process, post-screening, what Dr. Manning was talking about, you have your next step, which is your initial test. We call that the diagnostic test. That test always has to be read by a boarded sleep physician, because then you're not conversing with the patient or discussing treatment options until that physician has diagnosed apnea. Then in the treatment process, let's say that patient accepts treatment because the physician diagnosed them with apnea and recommended an appliance, and they said, hallelujah, I don't have to wear CPAP. They go through your treatment regimen, and you get to a point where you think that patient is dialed in. They're good to go. Their symptoms are resolved. At that point, you do a follow-up test on the same home sleep test with the oral appliance in. If they still come back with numbers that indicate on the raw data that you're not quite there, they're still snoring, there may be some apnea events, you're not quite there on the titration process, then you keep titrating. And that's kind of just a backstop, if you will, of information. The ending test, so whether it's that one or a follow-up one, after you're done titrating and you see that from the study results, they're not snoring, it doesn't look like they're having apnea, you send that test to the sleep physician. That's what we call an efficacy test. So the bookends are your diagnostic and your efficacy test. Those two have to be read by a sleep physician. One, to diagnose and get the recommendations for treatment. On the efficacy side, you have to demonstrate as a provider that your treatment for this life-threatening condition is working. Otherwise, you just have a document that says, this patient has apnea, they're under your care, and then you have no record objectively on a test that you've resolved their apnea. You just hear from the patient that they feel better. That's a bad spot to be in if that person gets in a car accident or something like that. So the bookends are the ones that we want to send to the sleep physician.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I have decided to, and would recommend if somebody's wanting to get quite serious about it, to have your own home sleep testing equipment as part of your sort of armamentarium in your office. And part of that being, you know, it takes down those barriers. Yes, I have a pretty good relationship with a sleep lab that's very close to my office. I work with them quite a bit back and forth, but that is a difficult relationship to forge. But the other thing is if I have a patient that I'm screening and they're excited about wanting to be tested and be diagnosed with this so that they can move forward with treatment, and then I tell them, now you have to go make another relationship with you know, a place where you're gonna have to sleep in like a foreign land here, you know, you're gonna have to new bed, hospital type setting, that's another barrier for the patient. So to have home testing equipment makes doing those bookends so much easier. And for dentists, since we can't be in their home and titrate them while they're sleeping like they would during a test, to be able to say, hey, look, I sent you home with this test. It cost me $12 to $20 in disposables. I come back, the data's not where I want it. I can change that up a little bit and not have the sleep physician use that as my efficacy test until I feel like the efficacy is where I want it to be. And so the ability to have that and do that very easily really only comes if you have some of your own home testing equipment, in my opinion.
All right, thanks. So you've got a lot of experience, Dr. Manning. So I'm going to kind of lean on you to this. Chef Gordon Ramsay. He has written a lot of cookbooks. He's had a lot of TV programs. He knows how to turn around restaurants and shake and rattle and roll cooks into chefs and all that wonderful stuff. And as I mentioned, he's written a lot of cookbooks and he's written a lot of recipes, yet he's never shared a single one of them. And you talked about that. Can you share something in your recipe book, an experience that you had, a problem that you thought was one thing and you ran into it and now you're like, wow, I'll do it different. If I could tell a dentist to not do this and do this, are there two things that you would share with us and tell us a little bit about your recipe?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about sleep, and anybody that's doing it day to day will probably say the same thing, and that is the actual nuts and bolts of dental sleep medicine are quite easy. Now, you would probably hear somebody like Gordon Ramsay say, making a mushroom risotto is also, quite easy too. And then you say, well, yeah, that's easy for him to say, but, is it really that easy? And truthfully, from the fabrication of an appliance, and let's just get right down to super brass tacks, fabricating an appliance is like anything else that we do. We'll take an impression, we'll send it to the lab, they send us back something that we can use. So as far as the nuts and bolts of dental sleep medicine, I mean, anybody tomorrow could fabricate an appliance, take an upper and a lower impression, send it to a lab that makes them and say, hey, I want a appliance, I want a Herbst appliance, I want this appliance, I want that appliance. That part of it's really easy. So there's really no secret sauce in making an appliance. So really the only secret sauce comes in confidence building and knowledge to be able to talk to patients. And so when I say there is nothing super complex about treating dental sleep medicine, so why is not everybody doing it? They're not doing it for exactly what Michael said earlier, and that is the confidence to be able to sit down and say, I know enough to talk to this patient. I know enough to talk to maybe a physician. I know enough to be dangerous, but I know that I don't know it all. And I think that if dentists knew that they don't have to know every single thing about loop gain breathing, or they don't need to know everything about Bernoulli's principle of atmospheric pressure and all these things that, you'll get bogged. You go to the CE course and bless them, I love the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine. I study with them. I've been to their things. They will bring in physicians and they'll really get into the weeds. You know what I mean? And I think so often the dentists are like, well, no way, no chance. And I don't have the time, the energy to learn sleep like that. So the secret sauce for us is that you need to know what you need to know. And that's a hard thing to say other than, having somebody to ask a question to. Because right now, if I were to say, hey, you've got a patient in your practice, I say, Brent, your practice has a patient that has moderate sleep apnea and they want an oral appliance. You could have them have an oral appliance in a week, you know what I mean? Because you would say, oh, you want an oral appliance? Sure, upper lower impression, and I send it off. But it's kind of like my first patient. He knew he wanted an oral appliance. He knew what it was. He knew how to use it. He knew all that kind of stuff. So for him, it was just a matter of having somebody fabricate it for you. Well, that's easy. What we need to do as dentists in the secret sauce is just find out how to get people to that level to where they want us to take that impression. And really, there's not a ton of secret sauce to it other than learn a little bit about apnea, learn a little bit about what it looks like. My big thing that I tell people that I teach is spotting somebody with sleep apnea is not like spotting somebody with a toupee. Spotting somebody with a toupee, that's a classic Seinfeld line, right? It's not like spotting a toupee. You know, most people
are making me thirsty. Hold on.
Yeah. most people can spot somebody with a toupee from a mile away, but you know, you can't just assume. You know, I'd say one of the nuggets is you can't just assume just because somebody doesn't look like they would have apnea that they don't have apnea. You know, I have sleep apnea. I was diagnosed with moderate apnea, but of course, I keep myself from the shoulders up on purpose. You know, I'm a heavy barrel-chested guy with a big, thick neck, and yeah, I am a little bit more the picture of apnea. However, my mother is 5'2" and probably weighs 115 pounds. She snores like a freight train. She's very active. She walks 3 miles every morning. She's not fun to go out to dinner with because she puts her own salad dressing in her purse. You know, she's very, very healthy, yet she has sleep apnea. And so when you look at my mother, and this is not just because she's in her late 60s, this was when we were kids and camping in a trailer, and we would wake up and blame my dad for the nightmarish freight train snoring all night, and come to find out years later it was actually my mom. So that is one of those things that it's just the knowledge. I mean, the secret sauce is the knowledge. Learn how to be confident, and truthfully, there's a lot of courses out there that are going to teach you knowledge, but at some point you kind of have to jump off the deep end. Once you jump off the deep end, you want to have somebody in your corner, like a Planmeca, or like, you know, some of these third-party companies like Awaken2Sleep and others that are on the call, that you can feel confident asking a question to. Because just like anything else in dentistry, the first time you do an implant, don't you wish you had somebody over your shoulder? And often we'll have a rep over our shoulder the first implant we do. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for that type of education or that type of confidence to have somebody there to help you out, maybe you wouldn't drop that first implant as a general dentist. And the same maybe goes for a sleep appliance. I know that was kind of not exactly what you were looking for, but there really just isn't like something exactly that Ramsey's putting in his risotto that makes it so much different than mine. It's just confidence and being able to be confident in doing it.
Right. Absolutely.
Well,
so Chef Michael, I can't remember that famous chef. He's a 5-star chef too. So Chef Michael, I'll call him Chef Michael. You want to add to that?
So I do. So first thing, yes, Gordon Ramsay put something in his risotto, Dr. Manning, that you don't, and it's love. Yeah. I mean, just let's be real, right? He loves his food. So, so I'm going to make a comment on Dr. Manning's very raw and kind of transparent answer to you. I find this question challenging, and we actually ask it internally in our organization to help us better answer our clients. Because when you're doing something so long and you get good at it, it's hard to build the FAQ when you've lived it for so many years. So when I hear Dr. Manning say what he just said, I would say, distilling all of that down, look at this guy. He cares about his patients. He's on this call to talk to us, and he has genuine concern, genuine care, but he's real. That real communication is absolutely critical in the program. So when you're talking to a patient about something that they didn't think they had, they walked in unknowing, you've screened it, the physician has diagnosed it, this can feel like a whirlwind to people, especially if they find out that this is the underlying cause to things that have been attacking their life for a long time. It's a pretty vulnerable place to be. So as the doctor, to come in and have empathy for patients and communicate clearly in terms they understand, super critical. And like Dr. Manning said, with the higher level courses that some of the fantastic brains in sleep medicine bring, you know, getting stuck in the weeds, I mean, we've got to know where the weeds are, because, man, that is where innovation happens. That is where depth of knowledge happens. But when we're trying to translate that as you guys, as providers on the day-to-day, man, that translation is probably the biggest challenge that we see on a daily basis, both for the team and for the doctor. How do you communicate depth of knowledge where you go to a course, get stuck in the weeds, turn around and then talk to your patients in a way that actually engages them to move them to action. Those words that we are limited to in our, language, if you will, it sucks. Because if they could just get in your brain and see your heart, that would probably be a whole lot easier, like mind meld. But that doesn't work. At least when Dr. Manning tried it on me, it didn't work. So I would say, translating what he said, that's the biggest thing. And you can see from this guy that that's just who he is as a person. The one thing I would add to that, a lot of people say in the industry, and it's very true, dental sleep medicine is a team sport. It's a team thing. And this is one of those things that you drop in your practice that affects every single role, minus your sterilization tech. And now with new reopening guidelines, it might even include them. So when you've got an entire team of personalities and people and skill sets and knowledge and the way they communicate, and you're trying to communicate this tough thing and be real and be compassionate, and then you expect them to, I would say one nugget that you guys could take away from this: understand how your team learns. If you're going to try to teach them something or get them a coach or send them to a course, how do they learn best? Is it self-paced? Is it in a group? Do they need dialogue back and forth? Like, what level of engagement do they need to learn best? And how can you put your best foot forward to implement this? If you're relying on them to talk, you've got to be singing the same song. It's got to sound like a symphony, not like my first graders orchestra where they all have the same instrument and it sounds like chaos. That's a big difference with a very big different outcome.
Well, that's why I keep hearing Dr. Manning saying people, not dentists, right? So it's about team members, right? Yeah. Everyone's in this together, and including the patient. It's not about us, right? It's not about Michael. It's not about Dr. Manning.
That's right.
So we have to wrap up, unfortunately. We've got a 4-part series. This is one just to get going, to let everybody know and be able to, answer these tough questions. And we're going to talk about screening. That's going to probably include conversations with patients. It's probably going to include maybe a little bit about how we can utilize 3D technology to screen, not to diagnose, right?
Yeah, I like it.
Yep. And then we're going to talk about the business side of it, which is, I'm assuming, the medical billing side of things. So we have a lot of stuff. So I'm going to leave the last word before we check on the Q&A in the chat for any questions and offer the CE link. Any last words, Michael, Dr. Manning, that you want to share with everybody before we wrap up?
Go ahead.
I'll go, and then the leader, you can go last, okay? Since you're most important. I would just say this. We started off with a super important topic when Dr. Manning said, lots of question marks, the intimidation factor. I'm just going to say to you guys, if you have the ability to treat patients, you are powerful, because you have the potential in your day-to-day life, in your practice right now, to affect change, radical change in the lives of other people. That is one of, if not the single greatest gift that we have as human beings, that we can actually do something, communicate, physically do something to actually affect change in someone else's life. So if you are in a tough spot, if you are struggling in your dental sleep medicine practice, if you're taking the lumps on the chin, take a second, close your eyes, and remember how powerful you are, and that you can overcome whatever challenge is in front of you. There's a lot of resources out there. There's people to help, but know that you're powerful and you can do that.
Well, you should have gone last. That was really, really inspirational. Come on. Now, that's the one where you're supposed to drop the mic and walk out. No, I kid around when I actually was going to say something so similar. Now it's going to seem disingenuous. Dang it. No, what I was going to say, I started off kind of joking around. I started off joking around about this DO composite, right? I do a really fine DO composite. Sometimes I'll just spend that extra 30 minutes just putting in tertiary anatomy, and maybe I'll even do a little bit of customization staining on those composites, because patients get super excited about it and they stand up and they give me big, big hugs. And of course, every dentist that's on the call knows that that is a silly, never going to happen. Most of the time we have to try to convince them that what we're doing is a good thing for them when we're doing a DO composite, because they don't want to be there. They don't want anything to do with what's happening. that is, in a very selfish way, the exact opposite of my dental sleep medicine practice. We have patients that are coming in and they're hurting. Now, as dentists, we're used to people hurting, but we're used to people hurting here or swollen. These people are hurting here. These people are, their life as they know it is affected. These are people that are going through depression. They're going through anxiety. They're going through life-threatening illnesses like hypertension, congestive heart failure. They're not sleeping in the same room as their spouse. They're missing out on that piece of their life. They don't have enough energy to spend time with their family. They don't have enough time or energy to go on vacation. The thought of things that are outside of just the bare minimum to stay alive, they don't want to do these things because they are dying slowly of this deadly disease. So when we take these patients, and often they're patients that have tried other modalities that just are intolerable to them, they come to us desperate. They come to us hoping, and really that's it. They come hoping, praying that we're going to be able to help them. I can promise you that in 14 years of clinical practice, post-college practice, I would say 95% of all the hugs and kisses that I've got, and that is including really fantastic veneer cases that I do. If anyone needs a veneer case, I am in Gilbert, Arizona. I'm joking. But for all of the hugs and kisses that I ever get from patients, it's my sleep patients. People are excited about their smile. People are super excited about that DO composite that I've done. But people come in, we get cards, we get Christmas cards, we get thank you cards, we get hugs, we get kisses. We get people that come in because, while we've changed people's smile and they're excited, that's one teeny aspect of their life. When we change their actual life, I know I'm overstating it, but I had a lot to live up to after what Michael said, so I have to end it with an even bigger mic drop here. But it really, truly is the case. We see people come in and they just don't know how to thank you enough because they've gone so long hurting so bad. That it makes it worth it. It will make it worth it for you to hack through your own forest. It'll make it worth it for maybe some of the financial implications that it has as you up your game with equipment in your office. That kind of stuff will not only be worth it because you're going to be helping patients, you're going to find out in this continuum of webinars that you're doing that there's a business behind this. I like to focus on the patients because I've found that the business does take care of itself and there is money to be made in this. But man, talk about the impact on your patients' lives, much more than you'll ever probably get, unfortunately, as a tooth guy.
Well, that was fantastic. This has been a fun hour with the experts, and I need to now turn it over to my good friend Jody to see if she's not sleeping.
Not sleeping.
Oh, I hate those.
If she's sleeping, it's because I put her to sleep.
So Jody, any questions on the Q&A, or if they slid over to the chat that we can address?
Yeah, first of all, let me just say that if you have questions, please submit them via the Q&A. I think some were submitted via chat. If you posted your questions in the chat, please move them over to the Q&A. I have also just posted the CE survey link along with the AGD code, but please note that the webinar link, the recording will be sent as well as the CE survey link in an email following this webinar. Okay, that said, so we got a couple questions. For these efficacy tests, are you looking for data that is favorable for one night or a week? How long before submitting to the physician? Do you find most patients very compliant with these at-home sleep tests?
Well, I can jump in on that. I work with Michael, so he sees my home sleep tests, or his group sees my home sleep tests. I will traditionally do one night. If I bring it back and there's not data, I can do a second night. A lot of times if they're going to take it on a Friday night or a Thursday night in our case where they're going to have it on a weekend, I'll send them with an extra set of batteries and say, hey, look, if it's not too invasive, take a second night. The one nice thing about some of these new home sleep tests is that they are comfortable. They're not super invasive. They can sleep in their own bed. They can sleep in their own environment. They can go through their same routine. So we do traditionally get pretty good data. There's a few things that we've started to incorporate with that to make it to where it can only be one night. Specifically speaking, we'll have people put a little medical tape on the nasal cannula because sometimes that will fall out and give us bad data. We'll have people sometimes put a little bit around the pulse oximeter to help hold it on so it doesn't come off. But in essence, for us, One night is sufficient data. If we can get a second night, great. It doesn't cost us anything more to get a second night versus say like an in-lab, it's going to cost you exactly the same amount each night because they're going to have to pay somebody each night.
Right. Okay, so the next question is coming from a pediatric dentist that has had a few kids with severely restricted airways, and the moms are reporting heavy snoring. Currently, they're referring to an ENT, but they're looking for guidance on whether or not sleep apnea appliances are recommended for kids 3 to 7 specifically.
That's all you, Michael.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So from a pediatric standpoint, it is a little bit of the Wild West from a treatment planning perspective. Kids are suffering from restricted airways and obstructive sleep apnea. That's a fact. So I applaud you for actually screening and referring out to an ENT. Guidance on that, I would say if you're not happy with the ENT relationship that you have right now, I would highly encourage you to find a pediatric specialized ENT that also does airway. They are out there. They are fantastic. They will do an intraoral exam. They'll actually do a nasopharyngoscopy sometimes to find out where the obstruction is happening. They'll immediately look for TNA first, tonsils and adenoidectomy, and then they will likely either refer them back to you for orthodontic care or some type of an appliance, or they will recommend CPAP, which is absolutely awful for a child who's having craniofacial development during that time in their life. Specific to your question, ages 3 to 7, yes, there are appliances out there on the market, FDA cleared to treat airway issues for that. MyoBrace and thehealthystart.com are some resources and places to go. Just be careful with that. If you don't know orthodontics, you're going to need some training on orthodontics because that's what you're doing. You're helping correct habits and guide craniofacial bone growth development in specifically the hard palate to grow an airway. The other thing that I'd highly recommend is find an airway-focused orthodontist. They will do interventional orthodontics in phase 1, not for tooth eruption, but for airway development, palatal expansion. Pediatric ENT, The Healthy Start or MyoBrace, and look for an orthodontist who's airway-focused. Build your team, basically. Good luck to you. Great question.
Great, and one more question. Is pre-D required for the medical insurance for OAT? And have you noticed any changes in occlusion after wearing the appliance?
I'll take that one.
Let me do the pre-D.
Oh yeah, go ahead. You do the pre-D because I don't like playing that game. I mean, we play that game every day, hundreds of times a day, but you go ahead and answer it because I don't like talking about it.
Okay, so pre-Ds, and I apologize for the splitting hairs. Predeterminations are completely different in medical than they are in dental. They do exist, but they take typically a minimum of 45 business days to get a determination and payment guarantee. It is highly uncommon that you ever get that in medical insurance. What you're probably asking is a pre-authorization, which is not a guarantee of payment, but it's the checkbox of asking for permission to deliver this appliance based on medical necessity. The answer is almost always yes. Except for Medicare and a few PPO insurances, you almost always have to get a pre-authorization to deliver this piece of durable medical equipment. Greg, occlusion, hit it.
Yeah, so for anybody that's going to the internet, the fountain of all knowledge, the place where we get every single piece of information that we ever could possibly need or want, you will find that everybody anybody that is going to talk about complications from oral appliance therapy is always going to talk about occlusion and tooth movement. Now, that being said, tooth movement has become far less of an issue, especially with some of the newer appliances. Some of the newer appliances are actually digitally fabricated and milled, and they are probably a better retainer than an Essex ever thought about being. So as far as tooth movement, no. So that was just answering the question that didn't get asked. You're welcome. Now, the actual question that did get asked was occlusion. I tell patients that that is a possibility. However, I tell patients that I will handle the oral appliance, I will handle the titrations. They only have one job every morning. Make sure they get to the bathroom and make sure that they get their bite put back in. And what I mean by that is maximum intercuspation. Make sure that in the morning, if you could put your teeth into your normal bite the night before, make sure in the morning within the first half an hour, you can get your bite back in there. And yes, it will feel stiff. You'll feel that hydraulic pressure of the condyle trying to move back up into the fossa. But I say this a lot. Now you won't be able to see me, maybe you will. this is probably a bad idea because I'm telling everybody that I'm going to go golfing later after I finish this. If I sit like this, and I sit like this for 8 hours or however long I'm sleeping, and this is not a normal position for my knee and my hip and maybe even my ankle. If I sit like that for 8 hours and then I stand up and I try to walk, right away, I'm going to do one of those like, stiff hip and stiff knee, because that has been in a position that it has not been in, that is not normal for it for an extended period of time. Now, most people have done this. So that's why I bring this up as the example. Most people have sat with their legs crossed for a while, and then they stand up and their hip feels funny or their knee feels funny. And for most people, the first thing that they think about when that happens is always, I'm never going to walk again. I'm never going to walk normal the rest of my life. And of course, I'm kidding. They don't say that. That's not what they say. They say, I'm going to have to walk this off. It's going to be a little stiff for a minute or so until I can walk it off, get it back to normal. Everything normalizes and we're fine. That is the same with the jaw joint. For most patients, they're going to wake up. It's like they've had their legs crossed. They're going to be a little stiff in the jaw joint, not painful necessarily, just a little stiff, a little tough to get things back in. And within the first 30 minutes, if they can walk it off or they can kind of get their bite back in, we have had so few, to almost none. I don't want to say none because there's a few little outliers there, but we have had so few occlusion related issues associated with oral appliance therapy that it's not, for me, I just wish they would take that off the internet because it's just not as big of a thing as it's made out to be.
Awesome.
Well, great answer.
Thank you so much. That's all the questions, Jody?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. So you can go golfing now. Jody, thank you for being my lifeline on this, and Michael for your expertise and your knowledge and wisdom and all of that in this area. It's very important. And then, of course, to you, Dr. Manning, for sharing with us through the Buckeye of a dentist with experience.
Only the best for me.
Thank you for taking the time before getting out to your personal life. And when you're going back to work, be safe, and hopefully the team members are all doing well, and we're all
thank you.
And tune in next week. And
thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.